is how can we ensure AI systems foster collaboration between not just humans, but also between humans and machine agents, and also more than human, like rivers and forests and so on. So how to integrate that into your own work. So I'm offering some snippets from my own career to illustrate that. First is the bridging system that I already talked about. And here the golden standard is the Stanford Online Deliberation Platform. I work with the Digital Deliberative Democracy Lab here to make sure that when Taiwanese face, for example, deepfakes and so on, we send 200,000 text messages to random numbers around Taiwan, asking them to be on the Stanford platform. And then we chose more than 400 people, stratified random sampling, statistically representative of Taiwan in rooms of 10, facilitated by an AI, so that people can say, oh, let's require digital signature on all advertisement, let's make platform pay full liability for unsigned investment ads, we can throttle TikTok if they refuse to set up a Taiwan office, and so on. None of this is content level censorship, and all is about the actor and the behavior layer. And that conversation was done in just a long afternoon last March, and by July, all the laws has passed. And this year, if you scroll in Taiwan, you don't see any deepfake ads anymore. So it showed that with this uncommon ground, with this bridging system, any society can steer away from the cliff into this outer alignment, this horizontal alignment, to bring AI systems into our society. And the second is to build off-ramps. Some of you, I understand, are already working on decentralized AI, on portability, on making sure that people can take the context from any service to another AI service called the Human Context Protocol. And there's the first person protocol. There's many protocols, the Fediverse, the Atmosphere, the Blue Sky Protocol, and so on. And all these is basically ensuring that whatever information superhighway we are on right now, we can steer to an off-ramp, because there is still some way to take one idea, one number, one account, one agent from one network to another network, but the old network, just like when you switch telecom, you can keep your original telephone number, you can still forward everything from the old network to the new network. And so to focus on the quality of care, not lock-in, that's the incentive what off-ramp is doing. So mandatory portability, I believe, is making sure that it's a race to the top, not to the bottom of the brainstem, whether it is a social network or AI services. Now, finally, the third is that we can build what the Japanese Shinto idea called a local kami. Kami, for those of you who don't write kanji, is written with a kanji that means exactly God. But it's not the kind of God that sees everything and does everything. It is a kind of local bounded God that cares about the relational health of one village, of one river, and so on. And so this kind of local kami is symbiotic with particular communities. And instead of a fragile monoculture that want to dominate everything, these kind of civic care tuned kamis make sure that they exist in a symbiotic, not a parasitic relationship with people. And here we have also seen like very good work being done by the research community. For example, I'm part of the trustee in Roost, the robust open online safety tools. If you check out Roost tools, what it does is that it reflects the special norms and histories of each community when it comes to online safety. And every culture have different ideas of what safety means, or even what polarization means in online communities. And Roost allows the training of the local models and the federated training of these threat indicators in a global fashion without any particular culture dominating any other culture. So this is also a very good case of horizontal alignment. Now, the tools to fix the PPM issue is all here, as I mentioned, public, portable, pluralistic AI. And so our career choice really is this. Are we building AI system to supercharge conflict, or are we building it to foster cooperation? So I want to end on my job description. When I first became Taiwan's digital minister in 2016, they asked me to write a job description because Taiwan didn't have a digital minister. Now, 数位 in Taiwan means not just digital, but also plural. So I was also the minister for pluralism. So I wrote a kind of poetic job description, a very short prayer that I want to share with you. It goes like this. When we see Internet of Things, let's make it an Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience. Let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear that a singularity is near, let's always remember the plurality is here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Audrey Tang, for such beautiful and inspiring poetic words. Attentiveness over attention, horizontal alignment and connection over division and polarization. Those are very, very powerful and important messages that we need to hear today. I also wanted to mention that Audrey Tang recently received the Right Livelihood Award, which is known as a alternative or precursor to the Nobel Peace Prize, given to those who work tirelessly to support positive social change in the world. So congratulations to that award. Okay, now I'd like to welcome another polymath for good social change, Gita Wirjawan. Gita is, he had a very successful career as an investment banker at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, and then he devoted himself to public service, working under President Yudhoyono of Indonesia as a trade minister, and he continues to contribute to Indonesian government in many different areas. We have had the fortune of having him as a visiting scholar at APAC last couple of years, and then this year he is at the Precourt Institute in the Dow School for Sustainability on our campus at Stanford University. He also has widely successful and widely followed podcast, educational podcast called Endgame. And if you're interested in hearing from him about all things about Southeast Asia, as well as political and economic happenings in the world, that's a good podcast to follow. And he also has a new book coming out, or just came out, What It Takes. Really anything about Southeast Asia, he is the person to go to, but also about digital happenings in the world. And he will be a great conversation partner for this fireside chat with Audrey Tang. So please join me in welcoming Gita Wirjawan to the stage.
Thank you, Kyo. Thank you, Audrey, for the beautiful remarks. I want to pick up on a number of things that you alluded to. The first one would have been a PPM. And this kind of dovetails back to what I've been making reference to. The internet was created as a democratizer of information. With an intuition, I think people started thinking that this would be the democratizer of public goods. But what turned out was that it didn't become a commensurate democratizer of ideas, much less economic capital. Ideas have gotten polarized, as a result of which PPM rises. Economic capital has gotten so much more concentrated. So if one believes in that premise, intuitively one would think that if intelligence were to become abundant, is it likely to get undemocratized the way ideas have not, the way economic capital has not? One additional observation is that if you take a look at the technological platforms that have been tasked with disseminating ideas and information, they've not really invested in moderating contents, relatively and absolutely. What's the fix? The fix, in my view, short-term is activism, mid-term legislation, long-term education. I'm curious what your views are with respect to some of these. Please.
I think the short term is to flip the reward of the AI systems that are curating our feeds. As I understand, Grok, for example, is now being merged into X.com. And they're testing not just having Grok help write the community notes that reduce polarization, but also using Grok to sort the main timeline. So the first thing you see in the morning is the most bridging one instead of the most divisive one. And supposedly, according to Elon, before end of the year, you can talk to Grok and to set your own preferences in an intentional way instead of the addictiveness of the things that I would prefer. I don't prefer, but I still prefer. Determining the ranking, it will be the things that I intentionally prefer that determine the ranking. And so previously, it was just not possible to do that before generative AI, before the abundance of the Grok Mini models. And I think the ability for them to do so is important. We're also prototyping with another team on Blue Sky for the same thing. And so once many social media systems do more or less the same thing, then maybe we can go back and build a contextualization layer across all of them, so that you can take from, epistemic security layer of Blue Sky, hearing about climate justice, and translate that to the layer in Truth Social, talking about creation care. And two sides will be able to talk about the same thing, but still feel that they're in a lower ppm conversation. It's almost like coming up with, I don't know, geothermal energy, very durable material that can turn explosion, volcanic magma back into productive electricity. So to me, that's the really short term. But I do agree that without activism and regulation, we're essentially just depending on the goodwill of the social media tycoons, the oligarchy. And so the importance here is also to make that a norm.
The striking evidence, I think a large part of the audience here is embracing the responsibility of educating and being educated. You've been a prominent activist. I'm concerned about the legislation part. I've been observing not only in developed economies, but in developing and underdeveloped economies, there's a rising trend of what I call numb, anachronistic regulatory oversight. The guys that are supposed to be regulating, they don't know what the hell they're supposed to be regulating. Much less demographically, they're at a different age group compared to whoever is supposed to be regulated. How do you remedy that?
Well, as I said, in Taiwan, we sent 200,000 SMS from the trusted number 111 to literally random telephone numbers across Taiwan. And when we chose from the thousands of people who volunteered to deliberate on the deepfake ads issue, we ensured they have the same distribution as the Taiwanese demographics, occupation, gender, place they live, and so on and so forth. Right? So when those deliberative conversations took place, again, on the Stanford platform, we know that this is a snapshot. It's like group selfie of Taiwan. And so any worry about the disconnect just dissipates, because it is literally the same people as the wider Taiwan population coming to agreement, to the uncommon ground when it comes to such regulations. And this idea is really taking hold. Just yesterday, I was in Sacramento to work on institutionalize, to write into the Californian statute this experiment in digital democracy called Engaged California. And if they adopt deliberative poll as a way for citizen initiatives and so on to work, then we have not just in Taiwan and Japan, but the third polity of over 10 million people strong that uses kind of statistically representative deliberation as a way to overcome the gap of representativeness that you just pointed out.
I'm still not convinced if that's going to happen with the US. I mean, I think you've done a great job in Taiwan, right?
I'm sure California is part of the US, last I checked.
But if you would have taken a look at some of the testimonies that were given at the Senate by these brilliant, technopreneurs, you could quite obviously see that the regulators didn't have a good idea of what was supposed to be asked, right? And to compound that problem, we're seeing an increasing divorce between policymaking and public opinion. The public opinion, I think, resonates with what you're saying, and you resonate with what they're thinking or opining. But the legislation or the policy just seems to be doggedly in the pre-existing direction without being sensitive to what needs to be relooked at or taken a view of.
Well, I would agree that on the federal level, it is functioning, as you said. I would also say that the federal level did not preempt the various states from regulating AI or other emerging technology. I mean, almost, but didn't, right? And so now you still have 50 labs of democracy. And so to take a red state like Utah, for example, Utah passed a law just this year that says from next July onward, if you are a Utah citizen and you want to move away from X.com or TikTok into Blue Sky or True Social, the old network would be required to keep forwarding new likes, new friends, new reactions to your new network. So again, as I mentioned on stage, the idea of mandatory portability is fundamentally about encouraging competition. It is not stifling competition. So it's actually quite compatible with the Republican state's stance. And indeed, we see Governor Cox really worry about the PPM, and the depolarization effect of the Digital Choices Act is very fresh in his minds due to recent events. I think that is, to me, evidence enough that you have good support from not just the blue states, but also the red states on the state level for this kind of methods to work. And maybe after a few years, they become the norm. It's just like, now we just say, let's mail someone instead of saying emailing someone. So maybe at some point, saying let's run a poll would mean let's run a deliberative poll. The deliberative is not needed anymore. It's just by definition, right? So maybe we'll get that point in a few years.
Picking up on the point on competition, there's only 2, 3, or 4 companies out there that are basically disseminating information in a massive way without any kind of editorialization. That doesn't sound like companies being competed with or being in a competitive situation. And you put that in the context of how they can actually move things much faster, bigger than nation states. With respect to the less wealthy countries, I think the vulnerability increases, right? How do you address that sort of concern?
First of all, I think the main idea behind, say, the India stack or the Euro stack is not that you make everything by yourself using national champions. It's just not possible for all layers of the stack. The idea is that through mandatory portability, the off-ramps, you make sure that you can, just as today, using Open Router, right, you can switch from one language model to another language model without even thinking about which language model you're using, right? And so this kind of Open Router becomes only possible if there is a shared protocol when it comes to how to interface with AI services. And so if you imagine the same for everything, and India Stack is really good here, right? It has for payment, it has for identity, it has for all sort of like registries and so on. If you apply that to the world of social media, then that means that the public option does not need to have more people at the beginning. It can just siphon people who are fed up, right, with what Cory Doctorow calls enshittification of the internet, because when people achieve lock-in status, they start squeezing their customers. But all we have to do is to show, especially young people, there is a choice, there is a Fediverse. And we intentionally did that in Taiwan, so that we did not ban, for example, TikTok, but still our young people's usage of TikTok did not rise, right? They all went to the Fediverse. Went to threads.net. We're the largest segment on threads.net, even more than US people when it comes to active people, but we're just 24 million people. So it is possible, even for I wouldn't say Taiwan is like a small country, even for a medium-sized country, through interoperability and through public preference on the interoperable issues, such as the Threads Fediverse issue, and also building some public options as a backup to successfully change this over-dominance of big tech. At the end of the day, some people still are on X.com, of course, but maybe they become more interoperable over the years with Blue Sky, True Social, and whatnot.
DeepSeek was announced, and until today it remains on an open source basis. Does that sound like something that could be good for the global South countries?
Yeah, well, open weight models are, of course, very good because they allow for energy efficient tuning. for specific uses. For most global south, global majority nations, the lack of compute is really the highest bottleneck. Like everything else is downstream of the lack of compute. But if you look at the actual uses, like for translation, summarization, facilitation, industrial automation, and whatnot, it really does not need a trillion parameter model that memorize everything about Studio Ghibli to do such work in a local fashion. And so having open weight models available so you can distill, you can fine tune, and so on, is of existential opportunity for the global majority. So I'm really happy now to see the US also joining this, what some people call the horizontal race. And you see the open version of GPT that is very tunable. It's a reasoning model. And we're now also seeing research into curriculum making for AI models so that in pre-training, you can train away a lot of those downstream risks like synthetic bio or whatever. And so these kind of techniques, I think, will finally solve hallucination by introducing this local, social, cultural tuning like wevel.org and Roost and so on into the training pipeline itself. So all this is to say, yes, DeepSeek show people like this is possible, but now in French, like Mistral, Magistral, and here GPT-OSS and so on are now leading the pack, but just slightly. It's very neck to neck at this point.
I try to limit my mobile phone usage to less than 2 hours a day. And that seems to be helpful in depolarizing my way of thinking, right? But I'm a bit more concerned about my kids who use their mobile phones 8 to 10 hours a day, right? Is there merit in limiting phone usage for purposes of reducing PPM?
I think there is merit in making sure the reality stays more vivid than the screen. So I do use a computer. It's called Daylight Computer. It is a very high refresh rate e-ink. So it's incapable of displaying color, but I can still watch videos or whatever. And I find that when I watch video, I don't get addicted at all because it's grayscale. It's a piece of paper that reflects light. And so always to me, you are much more vivid than my screen. And in the off chance that I do need to use my iPhone, I use color filter on my iPhone. So it's, again, grayscale. And so I do use this e-ink and this grayscale screens a lot, more than 2 hours a day. But I never felt that it's part of me that I cannot put down. Like whenever I feel like, I just put down and go for a walk, right? So I think it is this intentionality, this attentiveness of our usage pattern that is really the key. And the introduction of friction, like through stylus or something, of course help. But to me personally, grayscale helps the most.
I want to push us on this again. But is there merit in crafting a new regulatory framework that would limit usage of phones for people below a certain age for purposes of depolarizing or reducing PPM?
Like in Taiwan, we ban small screens on classrooms, but we make widely available big screens that are meant to be shared, right? So it could be tablets, it could be laptops, and so on. And the students learn to share the screen with people, so become a pro-social device, not an anti-social device. So again, this is limiting in the sense of steering towards something. It is not just banning something. Indeed, this January, we originally worked with Gavin, governor, and Jennifer, his first partner, to have a deliberative poll and deliberative conversation with teenagers here in California about exactly this topic, about the use of screens and social media and companion AI and whatnot. And we planned 2 rounds, one with the students, one with the parents, and the Newsoms were ready to pre-commit, like saying whatever the students and parents agree, we would agree as well. We offer that as a promise. Literally, I was here on the week of launch, and then the wildfire happened. Right, so we did not yet get around to have that deliberation, but we did use the same apparatus to talk about like IMBY and NIMBY, bearing utility lines, MIMBY, maybe in my backyard if you do this, right? And to very good effect on Engage California. So we may yet to come back to California on this topic, but I think the point is that there's nothing about them without them. So it shouldn't be a bunch of adults doing the limitation on young people, because that's a sure recipe of disaster. The sure way to get something done is to tell teenager not to do it, right? And so, and so if the limit is co-created by the teenager themselves, then that makes me feel much better.
You mentioned geothermal, and I spent a lot of time at the School of Sustainability, and I have many discussions on energy transition. And I come from a developing country. We call that Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is generally electrified at less than 5,000 kilowatt hour per capita. Singapore and Brunei being the exceptions at 10,000 kilowatt hour per capita. The US and China each are at 10,000 kilowatt hour per capita. Just to give you an idea or a picture, for Southeast Asia, outside Brunei and Singapore, to go to first base camp before reaching Mount Everest of modernity, which is at 6,000 kilowatt hour per capita, we're gonna have to build a terawatt worth of power generation capabilities, which will cost about $2 to $3 trillion. Economically, mathematically impossible for Southeast Asia to attain that in the next 30 to 50 years, unless there's non-linearity in technological capital allocation and economic capital allocation. This gets worse with the remainder of the global south, which earn less than $13,000 per capita per year. So do you see that as a structural impediment with respect to the advancement of AI? At the rate that, you know, whenever one uses ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, or even DeepSeek, it uses 10 to 50 times more energy than a simple search on Google. So can we take comfort in the fact that the global south is not going to get more vulnerable because there is this structural impediment in the context of energy?
Yeah, as I mentioned, if you use those trillion parameter models just for translating, as I did actually, because we had a conversation and I skimmed your book and completely rewrote my speech just then, right? And I had to do some translation between vocabularies and between languages. But if I use, and I did only use a small model for that, but if you use a trillion parameter model that memorized Studio Ghibli for this, of course you're wasting tons and tons of energy and water along the way. And also it's slower. And also it's not marginally better, right? So the use of smaller models for these specific purposes is the Taiwan model. Taiwan is quite energy bound. It's very difficult actually to squeeze more out of the power grid in Taiwan. And although we have a lot of geothermal potential, we haven't yet automated the entire pipeline, so it's all robots, so even if it explodes, I guess that's okay, right? We haven't gone to that point yet. So in that, we really reward people who train small language models. Our National Investment Fund goes to more than 150 teams, each training one specific model for one specific social-cultural context. That is a fraction of what a billion parameter model is trying to do, right? So the point here is that I think it needs two things. One is we need really energy efficient inference chips at the edge of what Jensen Huang calls personal supercomputer. And we also need this small model that is locally tunable and with online learning actually delivers better results than the largest models, the billion, trillion parameter model that gets trained only like twice a year or something, right? So when both things happen, I think the economic incentive will naturally flow to this more localized intelligence, what I call local kami, and I think that would be one good opportunity for us, the global majority, to collaborate on this because we share each other's problem if we want to adopt these issues to transform our society. And we can make this problem into a room for co-creation if we take over some of those horizontal alignment and training jobs in a pro-social way, in a positive some way, so that one country can train for some other country. As long as it's open source, it should be auditable.
I want to be fair to the audience, but I've got two more questions before I open it up. Do you believe that, implicit in what you've just said, it sounds like you believe in the potential occurrence of more non-linear events that will bring about orders of magnitude of efficiency and effectiveness.
Right, the second horizon, the third horizon, yes.
Okay. Now, within intuition, it looks like China and the US are going to be the two big guys that are going to be fighting the race towards supremacy of AI. You mentioned the word humanity. You mentioned the word plurality. Do you believe that these two guys are going to be doing good for humanity and plurality in the midterm and long term?
First of all, I would push back a little bit. I mean, it was true that the US Congress, I believe, did mention the Race to Manhattan Project or whatever a while ago. But if you look at the new action plan, it's no longer saying that, right? And so there has been a kind of steering, a pivot of sorts, because people very quickly discover that unlike nuclear, in which you still have some sort of mutually assured destruction possible, in AI, it doesn't need uranium concentrated to any degree like the nuclear. If people figure out a way to do energy efficient superintelligence that doesn't need human to improve itself, then suddenly, like literally thousands of sites could have the equivalent of nuclear bombs. And worse, if you read the some rationalist folks' discourse, including the new book, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, they also think that those nuclear bombs may decide to explode by themselves, which is really stretching the metaphor. But I think the point here is that even though we don't know how likely these tail risks are, people widely here in the US recognize that it's not a good idea. Like, it's not a good idea to engage in mutually assured AI malfunction without even understanding what makes a confidence-building measure possible, without understanding how to make a promise that you know you are going to keep in a way that does not require, like, espionage in a multipolar world. Maybe you train some, I don't know, AI negotiator that can be destroyed if you don't agree an agreement or something, zero knowledge, right? So these are research level stuff. These are not things that can work like today. And without that, it is like building nuclear bomb without any knowledge about nuclear safety, and therefore not a good idea, right? So the vertical takeoff you implied, I don't think is a dominating position even now in the US. And I have reason to believe that neither is Beijing actively launching a super intelligence weapon under a bunker somewhere as we speak. They may at some point, but that is not the default trajectory for either of those superpowers.
A big hand to Audrey. Please, yeah. I'd like to open it up to the audience. Anybody with a question? Okay, we've got a hand up.
Thank you. Thanks for the inspiring talks. I have a question related to the mandatory portable portability you mentioned. What do you think for real name registration, mandatory real name registration for this one, or how do we still keep the anonymity but still have the portability you mentioned?
That's a great question.
Thanks.
So the question is about like the trade-off, right, between anonymity, but then it's pure slop now. Nobody can tell whether somebody is a robot now online, and real name registration, which not only docks everyone, but also makes it almost impossible to have free speech, and also, more importantly, free association, because you can always be threatened by doxing, right? And so, obviously, neither is a good ending. So, in Taiwan, what we did is called meronymity, or partial naming. So when you, for example, using our decentralized ID wallet to sign, you can prove, as you can actually here in California with mobile driver license and so-called true age, you can prove you're over 18 years old without disclosing your birthday or even birth year. You can disclose that you are a resident of Taipei City without disclosing your street address. And in none of these cases do you disclose who you are, your name or whatever, right? So when we are having this Stanford deliberative poll and we show the demographics, we don't de-identify, we don't dox any person. And any person is quite safe because people who share the same demographics actually a lot in Taiwan. And so I think building for meronymity is one of the crux if we are going to realize the agent ID, agent tethering, and accountability infrastructure while remaining freedom of association friendly when it comes to internet freedom. I'm very happy that the Japanese Digital Agency is making Web3 and that a priority, and I think more people should join so that Web3 is not just about payments, but it's also about ensuring privacy and meronymity despite the ability to interoperate.
Great. Anyone else? I'll swing to this corner. Yeah, then we'll take the next one.
I just want to get your thoughts on like cognitive decline due to use of AI. Like, I know I've seen a lot where like a lot of my friends use AI a lot, and it's almost like they're getting dumber as they kind of go through like asking, like offloading every question they have, every thought that they have to AI, getting a response, and it's almost like they're not thinking, it's like the AI is thinking for them.
Like it's not just a exoskeleton or exocortex anymore, right? It's like sending our robots to the gym to lift the weights, very impressive weights, but the muscle atrophy. Yeah, we do see a lot of that. I think the point I want to make is that while it is useful, of course, to upload everything you're thinking and so on into kind of a digital twin, the loyalty of that digital twin is very important. If it is only loyal to some maker, and then the maker decides to like introduce a new version, then yeah, sometimes you can go to Reddit and petition to have my old friend GPT-4o back, but it doesn't always work, right? So I think what's more important is that people need to learn, as we learned in the 80s in Taiwan, that no matter how friendly is this mainframe computer, all you have really is a terminal. And a terminal really doesn't have any power over what runs on the mainframe, right? Or neither does a punch card, right? Have much to say about what is processed. Okay, maybe we're old. This is not a running joke anymore. But anyway, yeah. And so when we invented something called the idea of internetworking between personal computers, everything changed, right? So instead of the mainframe operators deciding what to do with what you think, what you're computing or whatever, you can decide to download a copy of some spreadsheet software or desktop publishing and really know that your personal computer is personal in the sense that it's loyal only to you. And if your community run a bulletin board system or something, then it's loyal only to that community. And so this community scope and this personal scope, this parochial care agents, I think really needs to become the norm. And not many people know that it doesn't require a lot of compute to make that happen. Most laptops can run that, right? And so if your friend can look at the options that is available to personal superintelligence and learn about to keep the context closer instead of in somewhere in the cloud where it can be gone at any given point, then maybe we will have a much more symbiotic instead of parasitic relationship, because at some point then their intentional preferences can shape the interaction pattern between the personal agent and the person and the community agent and the community without waiting for the latest tweak from this general purpose transformer. Hope that answered your question.
All right, we've got one hand here.
So you just mentioned right now that you see many of these AI models running on people's personal computers, and I wanted to touch on both the currently ongoing right to repair and the right to own movement as in the context of AI, with many of these models being in the cloud and many computers being marketed as AI enabled. Do you see the issue where people are no longer as often owning the things they buy, expanding as a rise of AI? Or do you think in places like Taiwan, where your regulatory body is effective, unlike the one here, as Gita mentioned earlier, that will be curtailed?
Yeah, I think the right to repair is very important. It is also important in the context of the freedom of movement, right? Just the freedom to move across different places online. I think that is like even more fundamental. And to repair is kind of instrumental to make the freedom of movement and of association possible. So yes, philosophically, I think this rights-based approach is very important. I would also say that it's not always about regulation. Sometimes it is about norm shaping. A lot of the work Taiwan did when it comes to the solidarity economy and so on was actually not after we get to elect our president. Even during the martial law era of the 80s and 70s and so on, there's very successful movements around, for example, cooperative consumerism. So instead of individuals consuming what's the most inexpensive choices, it's a bunch of homemakers. They form together a homemakers union and decide to buy together and demand, for example, foods that do not carry externality on polluting the environment and things like that. And so simply by coordinate their consuming behavior, they have to buy groceries anyway. The Homemaker Union is still today the Taiwan's largest consumer co-op. And I think there is a lot of potential here when it comes to co-op movement. You can turn a city or even a county, a district or whatever, into this kind of upcycling machine. Using co-op thinking when it comes to producing, when it comes to upcycling, and things like that. Taiwan's one of the largest charity, the Tzu charity, basically has this flywheel of this upcycling circular economy. And again, quite profitable, and 100% of profit goes back into the sustainability. But I feel like I'm speaking in front of a real expert on this issue of sustainable cities and circular cities. But most these ideas started as social movements and as norm builders. And at some point, the state was like, okay, it's a good idea. Let's make it happen. Let's stay out of the way. But otherwise, I think the norm shaping and movement building really is the key. And starting a movement here, I think it's much easier than many other places because you do have access to personal supercomputing and the know-how to make personal supercomputing a reality. So if you start that movement here, I'm sure many around the world will follow.
Guys, I apologize. We're out of time. We got so many hands up, but we've got a hard stop at 2. Audrey, thank you so much for gracing the program. A big hand to Audrey.
Thank you for the great question. Thank you. Live long and prosper.
Insightful and really high-level dialogue. As they get off the stage, please give them another round of applause. Thank you. Now we have to move.